Listen, Arcade Fire is making their big return. A new album just came out. They were just on SNL. They're about to have a big tour. It's their first album cycle since their lead singer was accused of sexual misconduct. Clearly, the band is looking to turn the page on that. Are fans ready to move on? Their group chat's here. Let's go. I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud, and this is Commotion. Okay, I think the best place to start for us would be to I think you should just hear what Arcade Fire sounded like on SNL. Take a listen to this. That is Arcade Fire performing the song Year the Snake on Saturday Night Live this past weekend. Look, they've played SNL 7 times. That's something they've done every single time they put out a record. And normally, under normal circumstances, a new Arcade Fire album, that's an event. I mean, this is one of the most critically acclaimed, most beloved bands to come out of this country in the last 20 years. But with this new album, Pink Elephant, the vibes are a little different. This is the first music that Arcade Fire has put out since several women and one non-binary person came forward in 2022 to accuse frontman Win Butler of sexual misconduct. Butler said that all his interactions with his accusers were all consensual and he was never charged with any offense. But the news created a pretty gigantic rupture within Arcade Fire's fan base, and so we are going to talk about how a new album from this band lands in this moment. Maura Johnston is here, T'Cha Dunlevy is here, and we're ready to talk about this. T'Cha, Maura, welcome to the show, y'all. How's it going?
Is it going good? Hi.
Good. Nice to have you here. Listen, T'Cha, you've been reporting on Arcade Fire for the Montreal Gazette since they were a little indie band making a bunch of noise in the early 2000s. But then you covered the recent show at the Olympia in Montreal. Talk to me about that show. How did it feel compared to like other Arcade Fire shows?
Well, I mean, I was talking to a music critic colleague I saw at the show just beforehand, and we're standing there, and the venue's filling up, and we can't help but discuss what's going on, you know. And he works for a French paper, and in typical bilingual Montreal fashion, he said, "Say weird, like it's weird. There's just a weird feeling, like it's an Arcade Fire show, but it's not an Arcade Fire, like not your typical Arcade Fire show. Like Arcade Fire is a band that always like had these big emotions and the sense of a band, and you go to their shows, you let loose, the band's letting loose on stage, and you feel like you're part of this huge communal event. And you know, there's just these allegations have been looming over the band ever since, and the band has tried to just move on. Like, you know, Win Butler addressed them quickly, but then the band tried to move on without really saying anything more. And so it's just lingering. And you know, they call the album Pink Elephant. There's the reference to the elephant in the room, but it just is, you know. So you're watching the show, and it was a good show, and they played the first album in order in the first hour, and then they took a short break, and they came back, and then they played their hits. And then people really got into it more because the first hour people didn't really know the songs, and so there was a feeling of abandon in the show a bit, and the crowd was into it, but there was something strange in the air, let's say. And I talked to people going into the venue before the show, and most of them were aware of the allegations, but they still wanted the Arcade Fire experience. They still wanted. A couple were seeing the band for the first time. One woman who had been following them for 20 years, but still, like, this was her first time seeing them, and she just, it was one show she wanted to see before she died. And so she still wanted that, even if she was conflicted, and she was angry at Win Butler about the allegations. So you know, there's a lot going on and to unpack there.
Say weird is that, I think that's a great description of it. I mean, like, more the idea that a famous musician is accused of sexual misconduct, that is, not only is that not new, it has become kind of like par for the course of just modern fandom, I think, at this point. But I think just based on the reaction to the Win Butler allegations, there was something unique about that. What do you think was unique about the accusations against Win Butler? Why do you think they were uniquely upsetting to fans?
I think as you and Chabo said, you know, not only were they critically acclaimed, the bond that they formed with their listeners, with their fan base, was so strong and so rooted in this sort of like mutual respect and sense of trust. And the allegations kind of really split that whole idea open, right? It was like very, you know, kind of using the persona, if you want to say that, to create this breach of, you know, trust and responsibility. And I feel like that upset a lot of people because it was like, oh, was this all an illusion? Was this real? And you can always say, well, everything is a performance and stuff. But I remember those, early years of the Arcade Fire, especially it was messianic, it was like going to church, some of those shows. And to have that faith ruptured in this very specific way, by the leader of the band at that, allegedly, is, I think, more upsetting than if it was somebody who you heard on the radio and maybe you liked a song of theirs in like 2008 or something.
Yeah, I think messianic is a good description, I think, of the environment that Arcade Fire tried to create. They are still somewhat going for that. Like, I think you still kind of hear that in this new record. You hear that a little bit in the positioning of these live shows still. Win Butler has denied all those accusations, and he said that those interactions were consensual. And as they try to sort of like turn the page, this is a band that became kind of famous for these gigantic, elaborate album rollouts. I mean, talk about messianic. They keep doing that over and over again. But then with Pink Elephant, they're not just trying to, generate this excitement for this new record. They are trying to overcome some kind of PR crisis here, right? So, like, what's been their approach to promoting this record? How is it kind of different from previous promotional cycles?
Well, the first thing that's different for me as a journalist at the only English Montreal daily, the Gazette, is that the band is not doing interviews this time. This is the first album that Arcade Fire has not spoken to me for. I live in Montreal. I've played basketball with Win Butler. My first interview I got because I was playing basketball with him, and then I said, "Hey, your album's breaking. Do you think I could do an interview?" And he wasn't doing many interviews, and he did, which was great. That's how I kind of got the scoop or whatever. So no interviews for one, and the band is really keeping its head down as it's done since it released its PR statement, to Pitchfork. And they kept doing shows, which surprised me. I wondered if it was the end of Arcade Fire when the allegations broke, and they kept going. They kept playing festivals. So they're not doing interviews this time out. So nobody can talk to the band about the crisis. Like they can play their shows, and they've released these sneak preview songs. Like 2 singles have come out. There's the video that's come out. Now they've started doing these shows. They haven't done the secret small 100-person venue shows, but they're doing these mid-sized shows of 2,000 to 3,000 people capacity venues.
Venues that can sell out, right? Like they can easily fill a 3,000 person room.
Exactly. They're not in danger of going to an arena and it being half full and people going, see, nobody likes the band anymore. Or, you're sure to get only the hardcore fans who, even if they know about the allegations, they just want to see the band. So they're keeping things upbeat, let's say. One thing I did notice during the show is that Win and Regine are sharing a microphone. There are 2 microphones on one stand at the center of the stage. So there's more a spotlight on the 2 of them as opposed to just on Win Butler, like the hero, the star. Like maybe they want to take a bit of the spotlight off him and make it about him and Regine and the relationship. But so they're keeping their heads down and they're just playing the music. And I think it's been an effective rollout in terms of a subdued rollout for Arcade Fire, in that people can't talk about the controversy. They just want to move on. So for their ends, it's effective. But in terms of addressing fans' concerns, it's not effective. But they've just decided to move on from that.
Just before we play any of this new album, T'Cha, where's Win on the basketball court? Like you're telling me he's not showing up for the, you can't find him there to be like, hey, are you talking or not talking?
Yeah. I mean, he's not. They live in New Orleans now, so I haven't played basketball with him in a long time.
All right, but, that would in fact present a challenge. Okay, let's listen to a bit of this new album right now. That is I Love Her Shadow from this new Arcade Fire album, Pink Elephant. Maura, what's your impression of this record?
That's actually one of the songs that I like the best on the record. So yeah. I'm glad that you played that one. But there definitely feels like there's a black cloud hovering over it, even in those moments where the sort of old Arcade Fire bravado breaks through. It feels like somewhat there are parts where it sounds somewhat tentative and sounds somewhat, sort of almost like licking wounds, I think.
Hmm.
But I think that, the moments that I really liked are the ones where they kind of get back into the groove mode that they had with Reflector and with other songs like that. Like they're really good at sort of, riding that groove, and they have been since their earliest records. But I do think that there is this kind of like free floating malaise that's sort of like hanging over. And I don't know if that's my projection onto it or if it's just, the listening, but I think that that's the thing about music, right? It's like you're going to have those personal feelings, especially for any artist that you had a personal, admiration for.
Hmm.
Those are going to shine through when you listen to their new material.
Yeah, I had a hard time with the same thing that you're talking about. This idea of like I'm listening to
Yeah.
this record, sometimes I kind of find myself fully falling into that groove and be like, wow, we are in the pocket. They are in the pocket of what makes an Arcade Fire album or an Arcade Fire album. And then sometimes I'm like, am I projecting that this album is actually having a hard time getting off the ground in a couple of spots? Or is it like, am I bringing this story into it? Or is that actually in the music? So what was your reaction as you were listening to this?
Is very similar to what you guys are saying, like I listened to it again on the weekend, and I was like, oh, can I just enjoy the music? And that lingering malaise just followed me the whole time. I'm listening and I can't, like, I was thinking, well, if this controversy wasn't here and I was listening to this record, I would feel different. I would feel more excited. I would feel like, wow, oh, listen to the new things they're doing. But I have this discomfort, this say weird feeling, and it's following me, and it won't go away. Even if I can appreciate, there's some beautiful moments, like that song's a great song. There's some other great songs on the record. It never leaves. I mean, the new album's produced by Daniel Lanois, noted,
Come on, exactly.
Gatineau singer-songwriter producer, worked with U2. He brings his kind of pedal steel guitar in there, and it's some really nuance and emotion, like nice details in there that are great to hear. But at the same time, the questions are lingering, and the band hasn't addressed any of it, and that doesn't allow us to go on. If the band, I think, would come out and speak more directly and humbly about what's actually happening, and not just try to wash over it, that it might allow us to move on and accept what's happened. But if they don't do that, then it's like you're in a relationship and you're not addressing whatever problems you're having. It's not going to work.
I mean, okay, fine, but like the idea that this is a band that sort of like spent a lot of time building those relationships, I think like we're all kind of sensitive to that because we saw what those relationships maybe look like. When you listen to this album, Maura, are there any spots where you go, I think they're trying to repair this relationship? I think they're trying to say, hey, come back and let's do some repair on how you think about us. Do you hear any of that on this record?
I think the line about the line that evokes Pinocchio, my heart isn't of wood, I'm a real boy. I think that that's kind of like a way for Win to express that, he's been wounded by everything that's happened, and like he messed up and he wants to, make things right, and he's human and has foibles, and maybe like that whole messianic aspect of things wasn't such a good thing for his own psyche. And I think also just like spotlighting Regine. I mean, I love Regine the songs that she sings are often the best on the record. So, reminding everybody that she's also a key component of the band is really key, I think, too.
T'Cha, on the one hand, you have Arcade Fire, obviously having taken this reputational hit. Like you're not going to find a single piece of writing that's talking about this album that's not talking about that story also. On the other hand, they were SNL. On SNL, they were reviewed by every major music publication, radio stations that have previously kind of pulled their music. They're back to playing them. That includes the CBC, by the way. Like CBC for brief period of time after those accusations, CBC Music stopped playing Arcade Fire, and then they resumed playing them. Toronto's Indie 88 is playing them again. What does the future of Arcade Fire look like, you think?
Well, judging by what we've seen so far with this album rollout and what's happened since the allegations, I think the future of Arcade Fire looks like what we've seen in terms of, I think the band is going to keep a much lower profile in the media. I think they're going to do less interviews. I think maybe they've decided it's about the music now. Maybe Win and Regine are focused on repairing their relationship. It seems like it, like in the shows, they're smiling, they're letting loose, they're having fun. You can see they're trying to just like do the music. and focus on that. I think it seems to me that's what they're trying to do and will continue to do. They may do one or two very select bigger interviews at some point. Maybe they will even address the allegations. I think if they do, it might point towards a different future. I don't expect that, though, at least not in a huge way. I think the band, it's 20 years in, and I think the band has found a way forward, and that's to just focus on the music. They have a fan base that they can rely on that will come out for these shows, and they want to turn the conversation elsewhere.
It wouldn't surprise me if they or decided not to address these allegations or this conversation for another 3 albums. You know, I think they sort of turn inward and make a bunch of records that are just sort of about what the band is, and then eventually be like, okay, we can have a bigger conversation somewhere down the road. Maura, with just a minute left here, it's worth noting that Arcade Fire, not the only act to face some allegations, who seems to be on the comeback trail this year. Ryan Adams, the band Brand New, also touring this year. Those are bands or artists who have faced allegations of sexual misconduct before. Do you think this is a coincidence, or is it part of a larger cultural shift, do you think?
Well, on the one hand, in the news, it seems like the worst people everywhere are having a big comeback year in 2025. But at the same time, I think that with this, it's more of a question of what will the market bear? Not to, obviously, I know that the album was an artistic statement, but what will the market bear? Will the market bear, playing these smaller venues? For Brand New, I mean, they're playing arenas, which I find very surprising. Yeah. But I think it's again a question of touring is so key now to artists sustaining their livelihood as artists, that it's well, we have to go back on the road. So I'm curious to see. I don't know if maybe they announced a bigger tour this morning, the Arcade Fire, or anything, but I know they haven't played Boston on this run yet. And I'm curious to see what their response will be in these cities outside of New York, Montreal, Toronto, just to see, how the market responds. Because there are some people who are going to be like in T'Cha's story, there were the people who wrote them off. There were the people who were still hurt but curious, and then there were people who were we have to forget about it. So I think that you're going to see that further splitting of the audience, and also that10 just so much stuff to listen to now. Yeah. So it's a lot easier to kind of just be not for me, than it was maybe even 10 years ago.
I think that's a good place to leave it. I think there's a lot to consider here. I'm sure we are going to come back to this conversation, but I just got to say, I appreciate your time and your energy. Thanks for being here, you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Maura Johnston is a freelance music journalist in Boston, and T'Cha Dunlevy is a pop music critic at the Montreal Gazette. I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud, and this is Commotion. Okay, I want to shift gears now and talk about another big story. This one involves the world of podcasting, but because more and more we're seeing clips like this go viral.
You drink coffee, man, or no?
Nah.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, you've had it.
I have. Sometimes on vacation, I'll drink it recreationally. It's every once in a while.
Just like a celebration.
Yeah, no. It's
really?
Yeah, no. I just hate anything that messes with I don't like any kind of chemicals or anything like that.
Oh, really? So you like to keep everything equilibrium?
Yeah, my sister gives me such a hard time about this. She's like, you're just sitting there raw dogging reality.
Wow.
Just sitting there raw dogging reality. That is Mark Zuckerberg on Theo Von's podcast last week. That interview has more than 2 million views on YouTube. Look, podcasters like Theo Von have been attracting bigger and bigger audiences. And you know who noticed? The Golden Globes noticed. They're adding a Best Podcast Award category in 2026. Nicholas Quah has a lot of thoughts, maybe feelings also about this. Nicholas, thanks for being here, friend.
Many feelings, many thoughts.
I'm ready. To be here. Listen, what was your first reaction when you heard, okay, the Golden Globes, Best Podcast category?
So I heard it through getting a press release from the Golden Globes itself, which initially I thought was a phishing email. It just felt like, what? But that is my initial thought. And then I did verified, yes, it was real.
Okay, the awards press release said, quote, podcasts have emerged as a profound medium, you wouldn't know it necessarily from that exchange, for sharing narratives and building communities across global borders and generations. That's their reasoning for this new award. Nicholas, why do you think they've brought this award on?
Okay, with the caveat that this is speculation because they haven't really talked to press yet. They haven't really sort of talked about the details that they're thinking other than a few lines in the press release. For me, the Golden Globes, which has always been sort of the messier, thirstier cousin to the other sort of more prestigious award shows, you gotta kind of look through the lens of like everything they do is to get into the better celebrity parties. It is to be trying to be a little cooler, trying to be a little glitzier. So a couple of trends, right? Like podcasting is increasingly the domain of not just like native first, a digital native like talent, right? Like Theo Vaughn, Alex Cooper, Joe Rogan, but it's also increasingly the domain of celebrities. If I was being uncharitable, it's kind of becoming either the retirement home or the second job of like celebrities like Conan O'Brien or now Amy
Poehler, Jon Stewart. Yeah, 100%. Yes.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Smartless. So, and there's also this increasing videoification of podcasting, right? Like increasing numbers.
We're talking
of
video right now. Like people can watch. Yes. Yeah. 100%.
Exactly right. And YouTube has been trying to be sort of like positioning itself as the first like podcast stop for most people.
Yeah.
So if I was a Golden Globes and I wanted to sort of continue to mine and catch all that celebrity energy, this is a logical move, right? So if we're thinking about what a podcast is, the Golden Globes, I highly seriously doubt, again, speculating, that they want to award something like This American Life, that they want to award something like a narrative audio documentary.
Yeah.
Who's going to watch a television broadcast about those people, I think, But So two last trends here to watch. One is Netflix have started being somewhat interested. They've been talking about in the last quarterly earnings report about being interested in licensing more video podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
They're already licensing stuff from YouTube. And YouTube itself is trying to position itself as the future of television. So we're in this gigantic glob of content, primarily video, and the Golden Globes wants to set themselves in a position to capture wherever this is going. And I think this is what this category is supposed to be.
I will say that's like in pursuit of the thing that you said earlier about the idea of getting to better celebrity parties. Like we don't know a lot about how the category criteria are going to shake out, but we do know that 6 podcasts are going to be chosen from a list of the 25 quote most listened to podcasts. What do you make of that? Because again, you said not This American Life, probably not The Daily, right? Like those are not the ones that are going to be in this category. We are talking about maybe the Theo Vaughns of the world. What do you make of what they're trying to say?
So that's exactly right. So what I make of it when I see the phrase top 25 without much specification, and granted, like Golden Globes in the follow-up mentioned that they were going to announce their nomination rules in a couple of weeks. So my initial thought, my thought, I don't think they know what they're doing just yet, because top 25 can mean 1,000 different things. It could mean the Spotify charts, could mean the Apple charts, could mean the Edison Research charts, could mean the charts in my heart. And it is different from how nomination works in Golden Globes more generally, which is they get the voting body to vote for nominees. The voting body does not overlap with the podcast community. So they're in sort of sui generis territory with this.
Also, the only chart I ever want to be the top of is the chart of your heart. Like that's the one.
You're in the top 3, man.
Come on, that's what I always wanted.
It goes up and down a little bit, yeah.
I do have to say that, like, we played a bit of Theo Vaughn's podcast off the top, that conversation with Mark Zuckerberg, and shows like that are really taking off. There's an argument to be made that kind of just also looks like a talk show, right? It looks like, it looks like what the Emmy categories would, Emmys would do if they're like, hey, let's hand out a bunch of awards for talk shows. That is one. Maybe not one that you like, but it is one that is taken off. Why do you think Theo Vaughn's podcast is taken off?
So personally, I'm actually quite fascinated by Theo Vaughn's podcast. I do listen every once in a while.
Yeah.
It is, you can trot out all those sort of classic arguments, right? It's a hangout space. It is, it is like the future of like, it's two bros hanging out. It's that whole, what's this parasocial relationship thing going on? There's an argument where it's like these kinds of long form is hangout chatcasts opens up a door for greater authenticity on the guest. And I think all of this is true. But it's also quite simply where the kids are these days, right? Kids are not by kids, I mean people like Gen Z. Like I'm getting old. So kids is like 25 and below.
Got it.
That they're on YouTube, that they're on podcasts, that they're on their phones. They're not really watching broadcast television. That is, I think, a large reason, just structurally, why these kinds of shows are taking off.
Yeah, the idea of like, hey, I'm going to watch the Golden Globes because I might see my favorite podcaster, Theo Vaughn, receive a Golden Globe. That is not a future that I had in mind here, pal. Just with maybe about 30 seconds to go here, do you think this new award is a good thing for the podcast industry?
In the 30 seconds, I'll give you the 2 worst answers that anybody would love to hear. It depends, and we shall see. Because it really, really depends where this goes, and we shall see who gets awarded.
Well, okay, fine. 30 more seconds. What do you think it would look like if it was good news for the industry?
If it was good news, there would be a clear system. Like we would see what what a Golden Globe is thinking. Like when you award something as an awards body, what you're actually doing, in part of trying to, get into better parties, is to say this is what I stand for. This is
Right.
what this body stands for. So we really, they can lay out all the rules that they like, but whoever wins, whoever gets nominated, tells us a lot about what the Golden Globes are thinking, and that in turn will tell us whether this is good or not for the industry, however we define the industry.
And Nicholas Quah is going to tell them what makes for a good podcast in his heart. Nicholas Quah, you're the best, man. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you. Nicholas Quah is a culture critic at Vulture. He lives in Vancouver. That is it for the show today. My name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This show is called Commotion. We'll be back tomorrow. Would love to see you then.